Welcome back to Velshi Ruhle. It has been a bruising week and a half for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, and an increasingly frightening one for the woman accusing him of sexually assaulting her back in high school. Blasey Ford's attorney spent Thursday going through a list of questions ahead of a potential hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee. But before we get to that, I want to back up and see how we got here. Last Wednesday, news first broke in The Intercept that Senator Dianne Feinstein had a letter detailing sexual misconduct allegations against Kavanaugh, but that she was not showing it to the Judiciary Committee colleagues. Feinstein instead sent the letter to the FBI. The next day, a vote on Kavanaugh's nomination was announced, and Feinstein released a statement about the letter, saying the individual requested confidentiality. Last Friday, Judge Kavanaugh issued a denial of any allegation. On Sunday, Professor Ford publicly revealed in a Washington Post story that she was the one accusing Judge Kavanaugh. By Monday, the committee delayed the vote and began planning a public hearing. Kavanaugh issued another denial. Tuesday, Ford, through her attorney, requested the FBI look into her claim before any committee hearing. President Trump said of FBI involvement, it, quote, "It's not really their thing." That's not true. On Wednesday, uncertainty over Ford's attendance at a hearing scheduled for next week led Republicans, from Senator Susan Collins to the president himself, to issue public statements. That brings us to Thursday and the request for the Senate Judiciary Committee from Ford's attorneys, while the president, at a rally in Vegas, weighed in on Fox News.
I think it's a very sad situation. He's an outstanding person. And frankly, Sean, to see what's going on is just very, very sad. You say, why didn't somebody call the FBI 36 years ago?
Joining me now, Linda Fairstein. She headed the sex crimes unit in the New York City District Attorney's Office for more than 20 years. And Douglas Wigdor, a former prosecutor who now represents sexual harassment survivors. Linda, we need to separate politics and assault, because they are two very different things. So the president is saying, why didn't somebody call the FBI 35 years ago? That's a very different thing from, why didn't this come forward when we were going through background or several months ago? It's actually very common in a sexual assault to not report.
It's so easy to separate politics from the accusation. 1986, I started prosecuting in 72. Acquaintance rape wasn't even, and the acquaintance sexual assault wasn't even on the map.
What does that mean?
Meaning that people think of stranger rape, guys jumping out from behind a tree with a knife, or a gunpoint attack in an alley. People attacked by people who knew them, people close to them. Rarely, if ever, were reported. It's underreported
because they have to
today.
Exist with those people after.
They have
at
to
school
exist with those
and at
people.
work.
Everybody knows them. People say, well, he's such a good boy. He couldn't have done something like that. Parents didn't. Rape victims were always blamed. Sexual assault, I should say. Victims always blamed for participating. Why were you at the party? What did you drink? The attention was always on the accuser. Very unfairly. And just if you look at numbers from that point in time, such an underreported crime. I would have no expectation that a 15-year-old girl would have told her parents if she'd not been hurt, so they wouldn't know. It would have been local police, not the FBI, that would have been called. She was somewhere she apparently didn't want to be as soon as this happened. How she got out of it, how she saved herself and got away without getting hurt. There's absolutely no reason you would expect 35 years ago for this young woman to have made a report.
I agree with Linda. I mean, that's a typical what we call rape myth, is that people report these things immediately when they happen, women especially, and we know that they don't. But what's really important now as we come into next week with this potential hearing that might take place is to make sure that that Professor Ford isn't attacked on collateral matters, and that's why her lawyers are now starting to negotiate.
On collateral matters meaning her reputation.
Meaning things like her reputation, you know, searching her bank records, her phone records, trying to find things that have nothing to do with what happened 30-some-odd years ago. And that's what happens all the time in these cases when people are desperate to try and undermine the credibility of a woman who comes forward. And that's why they're trying to negotiate certain things that they're doing now.
Then help me get my head around this, because I don't understand it, or where we're supposed to come out. What about looking at patterns around Brett Kavanaugh? I mean, it is true he has except for this, and this is a big thing, in his career, a blemish-free record. But suddenly we are looking at his high school yearbook. We are learning that the guy in the room with him, Mark Judge, wrote a book detailing that these boys were partying it up and often blackout drunk in high school. And when I look at that yearbook page and I look at all the comments under it, you know, it does raise a flag. or does it?
It does.
Is that, what did you call it? Collateral?
It's just collateral matters involving her reputation. But the thing is that...
But help me understand that on the other side.
Well, if I were representing Dr. Ford, I would have my own investigators looking into his background and talking to witnesses. The reason why, it's not that he was, maybe a member of the 100 Keg Society that says in his yearbook. The thing is that a lot of it corroborates what she said happened 30+ years ago. That he was fall down drunk, that he's a member of this thing called the Devil's Triangle. That's
oh, God, don't bring it. You know what?
I'm sorry
it's before 5 p.m.
But if I were a
prime
senator,
time, I'll let you go there. Morning, no.
But that is relevant because he needs to account for what does that mean? Because if you Google what it means, that's what it does.
It's not lunchtime yet.
We won't do it. But if your viewers Google it, they'll see what it means. It's relevant to this.
Look at me, viewers. Don't look it up. I did it. I regret it. Don't do it.
And so those things that go to corroborate her story are relevant. Now, when they're negotiating the terms with the Judiciary Committee, there are some things that I think are good asks, and there are certain things that aren't. Whether she should go first or second, I don't think that that's such a big deal, frankly. I mean, in fairness to him, he needs to hear from her what exactly the account is so he can respond. I think
we know that, and she'll do fine. I mean, I think she tells a very credible story, and putting a judge in the room, there's no reason for somebody to do that if they're making up a story. The last thing you want to do is add a witness who could say, I was in California that night.
Why wouldn't they want to subpoena Mark Judge, who she says was in the room? Susan Del Percio pointed it out earlier today, and she said, I'd like to ask Brett Kavanaugh, if he were a sitting judge and a case was in front of him and it was strictly a he said, she said, zero evidence on either side, no witnesses whatsoever, he'd say, no, go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Because that's not he said, she said. There's your third person in the room whom she doesn't accuse of committing more of a crime.
Then what would be the reasoning not to subpoena him?
There is no reason. They have to call. They have to call.
He doesn't want it.
They have to call him. They can't just rely on an unsworn statement. Even if it were sworn to, you can't cross-examine a piece of paper. He needs to be there. He needs to be asked questions about what he says. He's a relevant witness.
I am not calling Mark Judge a liar, but help me understand. If he's willing to put out a statement that says it didn't happen, why wouldn't he be willing to testify? That's like me saying, lunch is at 12, and you saying, would you swear on your life? And I go, I'm not going to swear on my life. Like, then it's not at 12. Yes.
It's even worse than that, because she puts him in the room. It's exactly the kind of conduct that he's written about in his book that he engaged in at that point in time, blackout drinking. And I don't think he has any defense to not being present when they subpoena him. I think he's a critical witness, and if he says I was
But what is logical reasoning for someone who would say, I'll put out a statement, but I won't say it under oath?
It's somebody who doesn't want to be called in question and maybe have to give up his friend under oath, maybe have to answer some very difficult questions he wants to avoid.
But then what you're saying is he's lying.
Well, we don't know.
But if he's saying it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But he won't say it under oath. You're saying, well, he doesn't want to give up his friend. There's nothing to give up. He's saying it didn't happen.
What we're saying is that he needs to be under oath, first of all. Anyone can say anything when they're not under oath, and there's no ramification for lying. And then if he says what he says under oath that he said not under oath, then he gets to be questioned as to the veracity, whether what he's saying is truthful or not.
And wasn't he sort of saying, I'm sorry,
that he didn't remember?
He sort of saying that he didn't remember, and he was saying I wasn't there, just like Kavanaugh was, before they even know where there is, before anybody's even been able to place where the party is.
And he seems not to recall a lot. He and Judge Kavanaugh, both of their yearbook entries have things about, who won the Yankee-Red Sox game. I don't recall, which is an obvious reference, like they were too drunk to remember who won the game.
This thing's complicated. My goodness. Thank you both so very, very much. And you have to worry. I mean, Brett Kavanaugh's family, Christine Ford's family, there are character assassinations across the board. They got to get to the bottom of this. The Supreme Court justice seat is a very important seat. There's only 9 of them, and they last a lifetime. Thank you both so much.